Welcome to Small Business Success Talks Summer of Strategy series, where I interview guests to get their expertise in marketing and business development to help us all plan accordingly for the rest of 2023. Summer is a perfect time to evaluate how well, or maybe not so well, the year is going, determine what the gaps are, and learn from some of the best in the business building industry, their strategies and tactics to close the gap and build momentum in your own business and life. I am your host, Christy Smallwood, and let's get strategic. So thank you so much, Eric, for being one of my guests for the Summer of Strategy on Small Business Success Talk. I'm really excited to get to talk with my fellow Marketing Podcast Network peers. And I know that you have a buddy that you guys have an episode together.
Yeah, Mr. Marketing, Colin Jeffries, right?
And I did just listen to an episode before we recorded about marketing biases.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. The like recent, I can't remember the exact word that you guys use, but it's like recent, like the thing that you have recently happen is what you're remembering and how you're making. I was like, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Spot on.
And it's true in personal life, actually, just as much, if not more, than marketing, right?
Well, yes, and that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah. Right.
So I again, thank you for coming on and sharing with us. And I wanted to ask you, because I've been asking all of my guests a little bit of a different kind of question to get started.
All right.
So if you were to walk into a room to do a training or speaking or something, what would you want people to already know about you, to be clued in about?
Honestly, I think from a professional standpoint, it would just be the path that I followed. I'm not cookie cutter. I've been on all sides of it. I've been on the buyer side. I've been on the selling side. I've been on the strategy side. I've just been on all sides of it. And so for me, the reason that's important, there's two ways that you approach that. Somebody says, I've been on all sides of it because they're kind of patting themselves in the back or going down that path. That's not what I would be looking to achieve from that. It would be really just to understand that marketing's solving a puzzle. It's, what worked today doesn't work tomorrow. What works tomorrow doesn't work a few days later. And so just having either a very broad understanding of experiential marketing, or being willing to open yourself up to experiences that other people had. So, for me, it would be, this isn't going to be, in that scenario, this isn't going to be a lecture. This isn't going to be me telling you this is how you have to do it. This is going to be about a conversation. You got to bring your experiences to it and your thoughts. I mean, that's really how I would approach it.
Absolutely. So based on your expertise then, what is it about what you do that keeps you going, keeps you on fire for your own business?
Well, so for me, right now, what I do is I build marketing campaigns, strategies for brands and businesses. And that starts at strategy ideation, that goes to audience, and then execution and evaluation constantly. So I currently do that for a company called MNI Targeted Media. I've run my own marketing companies in the past from a consulting standpoint. I've worked for Gannett and USA Today and different things like that. So in I guess in the capacity of that experience, I got a little bit lost. You'll learn this if you listen to the podcast. That Colin and I will talk about a rabbit hole. So I got a little bit lost in setting up a little bit of my experience, but specifically repeat that question to me, and I'll try to come back from sounding like a complete idiot here.
You don't. It's a great list of your expertise, but what about what you do keeps you going?
So with all that, with what I do, it's really just the strategy partner, if you will. Like I can make a recommendation to my brother who owns a business, to a family member, to myself when I'm running marketing. because we're all in, we're invested, we kind of know what we think our brand message is, we think we know what our brand is. What's exciting and where I get kind of reward on this is talking to businesses that are trying to figure out how to evolve out of the past 36 months, how to pivot with a strategy shift or a brand reinvention, if you will. And so at the end of the day, we put tactics and strategy together to get results, but that's just kind of what comes with it. The interesting part in working with small and mid-sized businesses is really getting engaged with what their vision is and talking through potential strategies and outcomes. And what I always like to get focused on is that sometimes I think we get so like just hyper connected to results, and results are believed to be always positive. Results are just what happens through the process of a campaign, and what you do with those results, whether they're good or bad, how you learn and pivot. I said what works today, what doesn't work today is going to change. To me, that's the exciting part. It's almost like being in an ongoing conversation about keeping the marketing, keeping the messaging on pace.
So, okay. And of course, in the proverbial green room, I shared my excitement and love for strategy because I just love it. I think one of the reasons I love it is got to get outside of the environment to play differently with your business. And so
absolutely.
In that process, like what's some things that you know are game changers in the process of strategy when you work with businesses?
Well, I think so. For me, the first game changer is understanding, who we think we are as a business, who we think we are as a provider to our audience isn't exactly the same. And more times than not, isn't at all this. It's just not always translated to what an audience or whoever it is you're trying to connect with thinks of you. So we know there's often a statement that says we know what we know so well because we're close to it. And sometimes we don't communicate that as well as we should. And so I think the understanding that and the challenge of really stopping, pausing, being, taking a deep breath, staying in the moment, and understanding if who you perceive your business to be is who it actually is perceived, how it's perceived by the audience. And if it is, then great, we can build upon that. If it's not, then, that's not the end of the world. That just means we need to maybe get it to where you want it. Maybe that's a possibility. Or we have to say, hey, here's actually how you're perceived. Is that so bad? Does that, how close is that to what what you saw your brand would be or what your business would be? And sometimes I think we can get too stubborn in demanding who we want our audience or how our message resonates, and we just have to be willing to hear the feedback from the outside forces.
Eric, I don't know where you get the idea that business owners, entrepreneurs are stubborn. I don't know where in the world you come up with that.
Hey, it could be a stretch there, but yeah. Well, and again, that's kind of my point there too, is, stubborn you hear stubborn, you immediately have negative thoughts about it or think that it's bad. But, we can, everything is good or bad depending on how you utilize it and leverage it. So if you're stubborn, that's great. That's going to be a valuable asset, but that doesn't mean you have to be blind to what the data is telling you.
Back to your episode about biases.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Absolutely. And you're right. I have where I do a lot of personality assessments, and I have a very simplified one that's loosely based on DISC, but the results we talk about when your strengths are out of balance.
Like that.
Yeah. So it's not that it's a bad thing. You just need to be aware of what happens in the world around you when you're out of balance.
Well, it's kind of unrelated to marketing. Everything's related to marketing. So, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that, but it's not like in the discipline of what you'd learn about marketing and the connection of sales and marketing. But what you're saying right there is very similar to having you've heard this, I'm sure, before, the right people in the wrong chairs, or the wrong chairs being occupied by the right person. So, just like anything, just because one tactic, one strategy, one person isn't doing what we know they're capable of. It just might mean that we're leveraging it in the wrong way, or not understanding it in the right way. So what you just said made me think about that. That's why I want to share that.
Absolutely. I mean, all this is great. This is all great, good stuff that people need to be taking notes while we're having the conversation.
Well, so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because I was going to ask you another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were saying. So for small to medium business, what is some of the best advice you could give them? You know, our home heroes.
For launching, or for just building their business, or just, grabbing their marketing department.
What's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
For a small business advice? Well, it ties back to understanding who they think they are and getting that brand message out. I would say that even though I think you have to be open-minded to hearing if your perception or your idea of your value resonates and is shared back to you from your audience, I think you also have to have the conviction to not just throw everything. There's some excitement. I'll be in here if there's some dog excitement going on upstairs, but I think you have to have the conviction and the wherewithal to believe in why you started the business in the first place. Just because somebody's not engaging with your message, just because people aren't buying something that you're trying to sell, or whether it's services, platforms, whatever it is, e-commerce, it doesn't mean that you didn't have a good idea. It just means that for whatever reason, you're not having your message resonate at this point. So I think as marketers, we really got to focus in on that. So
what are some tools that you use to figure out what resonates? Like, how do you?
Well, I mean, we can use the definition of vanity. We can use the terminology of vanity metrics to say, is that getting overwhelming whatsoever? I think it's going to stop now, the barking. But we can, to answer your question, okay, so that'll be confusing anybody listening. But I think we can look at vanity metrics and say, okay, if it's digital, are people clicking on ads? Are people going to my website? And we can say, okay, well, that's good. That's the right audience. Are people walking in my store? Are people coming to see me at trade shows? Those are all good signs of engagement, but those are surface level vanity. What are they doing once they come into your store? What are they doing once they're on your site? What are they doing once they engage with you at a trade show, or whatever it is that your value proposition is? We got to look at metrics that mean something. I say it all the time in digital marketing. Many of my clients will, throw around the word conversion. Well, what the hell is a conversion? A conversion is just a bunch of letters put together to make a word. You have to define that, what your expectation of a conversion is. So to me, I look beyond those surface level metrics and really focus on the conversions. I could send 1 million people to your site tonight, but if not a single person takes action that you want, what does it matter that 1 million people came to your site?
Exactly.
I send 20 people to your site tomorrow and 50% of them take action. That's a much better transactional relationship.
So what are your thoughts about defining the customer journey?
Well, I think understanding the customer journey is extremely important. But it really, a journey is, if we can look back, a journey had a beginning point and an ending point, and lots of little stopping points along the way. And you can get between point A and point B probably a multitude of different ways. You have to start at point A, you have to start at point B, but in between there's lots of lefts and rights and up and downs and pivots. And to me, that's, again, going back to a business, understanding what marketing and sales is all about. It's understanding that your obligation to your business, to your client, whatever role you have in that journey, is understanding that if they turn left here, we want them to walk a certain path between that point A and B. I get that. We map it out, we plan it, strategy before you go into a sports game, before you do a live music event, if you're an entertainer, whatever, you have a strategy to get from point A to B. But inevitably, an amp goes out in a concert, a player gets injured in sports, some things go wrong and you have to pivot. So that journey is still mapped out, but you have to be ready to have contingency plans all along that journey. So we always want to push people from point A to point B in an efficient, productive way. But we also have to be realistic and understand that it's not going to go textbook It just won't. This is just not how it works. And so that patient journey can't be a disconnect of if they turn left, you lose them. You have to keep nurturing them back onto the trail, in my opinion.
So what are some great ideas that you've seen that have been able to nurture, as you said, along this trail?
Well, I'm a big ad tech guy. And so, for me to answer this question, I would really be leaning on technology of retargeting, technology of what does intent mean? Are we showing signs of intent? So the first thing, I talked about that point A to point B. There's actually a step that happens before that, and that's qualifying, sourcing, valuing, and saying this is a good fit customer. And let's say it's just that type of business, a good fit customer that we want to get from point A to point B. So we kind of put our game pieces on the table at that point. There's some beginning stuff that goes on with different types of creative, different types of messaging, A/B testing. And once you solidify and say, okay, these now have passed the test of engaging with the ad, they're interested in what our offer is, they're interested in our value proposition. Now we put them on point A. That just means that they like our message. That just means they may have liked something about our business or our referral base or something, but we still have to get them all the way to what we would consider the end, whether that's, a subscription service, an actual sale, whatever that might be. So, whatever it is your business is about. And so from that point A, then we want to make sure that we're continually touching them with the right kind of messaging. And the reason I like retargeting is because if you think of yourself driving down an expressway, you're getting off exit 71, exit 74, exit 75. And, how are we getting people back on that expressway? And that's retargeting. It's like, hey, I know you were interested last week. How do we get you back interested? They still meet the criteria of somebody that was interested. At some point, somebody will disappear because they went further down the funnel and they realized it wasn't for them. That's okay. That happens, of course. But I think the more that you're pushing people along is you have to understand that people are going to stop constantly. And so if you don't have the mechanisms and that's why like ad tech and digital marketing, there's all kinds of technology, like content and social and all these different kind of things to get people to engage, to say, hey, keep moving, not ordering them, keep moving and hitting them in the back of the head, nurturing them along the way and creating and adding that value proposition from beginning to end.
I feel like it's kind of like a tour guide in in Italy somewhere. Right, the tour guide's in front and it has this long stick with a little flag on it that says, come on now. There are costs. Come on, follow me. Like this is where I'm at. You can find me. Come on.
Yeah, you're right on there. I'll say that I just had this conversation with somebody about these tours. Because there's one thing that makes a tour better than another tour, and that is the expertise of the person who's leading you and talking to you.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so as you're going along that tour process, if you will, that's what the multiple touches, that's what the content, that's what the ad tech is all about, is continually evaluating. There's a reason that you started this journey. There's a reason why you're enjoying this process, because I'm giving you value every step of the way. Because once that value goes away, once the Independence Hall in Philadelphia, once the guy loses knowledge of what happened during the signing of the Declaration of Independence, then he's no different than you. He's not the expert, not the person you're believing to follow. So I think that's so important. It's funny that you brought that up, because it's like the key part of following somebody is the belief that, or messaging is that somebody, in this case, that it's making sense. It's delivering on the expectation that you had when you first started to engage with that company's marketing.
And you're walking them through an experience.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, and I just I have a note for myself, because I'm like, oh wait, that's a great idea. I'm gonna do that for my own self.
Yeah. Well, I did a tour of the Rabbit Hole distillery down there in your part of the world.
Oh, so yeah.
And that would be my experience. The gentleman there just knew his stuff inside and out.
We have a lot of ways that you can.
Yeah.
We have a whole bourbon trail around.
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of distilleries to stop and take tours
at. Sure. Yes.
So what are so going back to brand messaging, give me some great examples, some examples you like about really done well brand messaging.
Of brand messaging?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think White Castle has always done a good job with it. They're a Columbus-based company, so I'll keep it in Ohio, because their brand is not about. I mean, with all due respect to White Castle, I don't think anybody get mad at me. Their brand isn't about healthy, quality meals.
No, not even close.
Right. So think about that for a second. You're in the food service industry, and you're not about quality. You're about an experience. You're about Harold and Kumar from a movie. You're about a hall of fame of people who can eat so many of them. You're about stories. You're about individual people's experiences. So I feel like they understand that their brand. I mean, you can fight your brand message or you can buy into it. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So
Yeah.
they could have an owner that said, "This is crazy. We invented the spatula." Little known fact, if we didn't know that, they invented White Castle, the spatula. Yeah, it might be the industrial spatula, but they definitely invented it. I learned that. But you can fight it and say, that's not who we are. We want to be this. And you can spend millions and millions of dollars, and maybe you can achieve that. Or you can say, listen, we appeal to, and a White Castle in urban areas is much different than a White Castle in rural areas. So, there was a time that White Castle was the experience of a family on a road trip, just getting a few burgers, the kids and all that kind of stuff. So there's some nostalgia to it. And then there's the side of White Castle that's about, late at night, a drive-through, just whatever, with some friends, and you're just kind of getting some White Castles. But they've embraced the story of how our society sees them, and they haven't given up their values. They haven't lost that they're a family-owned company. They haven't lost that they understand that there's a nostalgic piece to their business, but they're pursuing a brand image that, while in line with those, is evolving for how they're being perceived in the community. And so a large scale community, like, the country. And so I just think they're a great story of understanding that a brand sometimes can change and evolve without you having any say in it. It just can happen.
I was gonna say, there has to be a tipping point out there somewhere. And I do remember my days when I was in marketing at KFC. And this was before the snacker came out, right before the bowls came out. So to kind of date myself in it.
Yeah.
But what they had found leading up to a particular point in time is, sales were down. And they were trying to be grilled chicken. Like, they had tried to do different things. Yeah. Move the Titanic away from the iceberg. It wasn't working, and it just wasn't resonating. And so they spent time, a lot of effort, strategy, a lot of money in creating the campaign that got them back to their roots.
Yeah.
And, it was the sponsoring NASCAR car, and just not reinventing, but getting even the Colonel back to his roots and putting old clips of Colonel Sanders in the commercials. They just did branding commercials for a bit on top of, here's your fast food stuff and here's the family meal.
Yeah.
But it all put it back to the core messaging of the history of KFC, and our sales exploded.
Yeah.
Because they came back to resonate with the audience.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I love the fact that you brought that up, because, we could, the Yum, KFC, Louisville, Yum, all that stuff. I see it all. But that fast food, there was a time that Pizza Hut was a place that me, my two brothers, my mom and dad, it was a pizza parlor. Right. And it was just a pizza. And my dad would get like a pitcher of beer. My mom would get a Coca-Cola. Let me paint that image. He wasn't like drinking a pitcher of beer out of the pitcher, but he would get a pitcher of beer. It was beer and pizza, Coke and pizza for her. And in order to stay relevant, up to date, they had to start stuffing their crust with cheese and coming up with 15 ways to make a pizza. And you can't blame them, because that's where that went. KFC, I think at one time that they had the chicken patties as the buns at one point, on some kind of iteration of a dark spot in the KFC marketing. But everybody's done that. Somebody has that. Coke changed the recipe. That was a disaster. I mean, everybody has that in the race to keep your brand relevant and moving forward. It's a long way to the long way to get to the point I wanted to make was sometimes we exhaust so much energy to find a new audience member when we could just take ultra good care of our existing audience member and expand that out and get them to spend more trips to the restaurant in the course of a week.
I thank you. Just thank you so much for that, because it is really hard in initial discovery calls and conversations that I will have with potential clients to get them to really understand it is less expensive to focus on building more of what you already know works versus creating something from scratch.
Yeah.
And especially for small business budgets, it just makes more sense if you're trying to we don't have to necessarily not do the new thing.
Yeah.
But you don't have the money to do the new thing. Why don't we focus in the best area here first?
Yeah. If you go all in on that, you could, we could talk about Burger King and their Australian fiasco in their equality burger or something like that. I mean, we could talk about Bud Light. We could talk about a thousand people, businesses that understand that sometimes you can take a devastating, those companies can survive backlash, but a small to mid-sized business with a marketing mistake, it can put them out of business. And so to your point, to go so heavy all in on something that's not proven that you want, there's some logic that suggests, why don't you just be the master of your universe? Why don't you just own what it is that you guys own? And you can slowly maybe try to expand, but you can't forsake or forget your core in the search of new, because you can lose both.
Absolutely. So based on your experience, what are some really good points and maybe examples of what not to do?
Well, I think there's a rush to, right now there's a rush. There's always been a rush to jump in to digital, because ad tech's always advancing. And so there's new technology that you're getting emailed on, you're getting, knocks on the doors for. I mean, you're exposed to all kinds of emerging ad tech. And so I think, my one thing is, and this is kind of a weird kind of ask, but if you don't have a friend, what's that old saying? I know a guy, or I know a woman.
I know a guy.
Yeah. So you need to have somebody that in the space of ad tech and digital marketing. Doesn't mean you have to buy everything from them. Believe me, I can speak for a group of people who are in this space that you don't have to buy. We like to talk strategy. We like to educate. We like to be a confidant. We like to talk shop with marketers. And so I'm always eager to discuss new technology that somebody's hearing about, give them my opinion, what have you. And so I think before you just race in and say, we've got to have a social presence, we've got to be doing programmatic, we got to be doing AI. If you're not doing AI, you're not going to survive. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You really need to take a deep breath, understand the tactics that are being given to you, how to use them, and really evaluate if you're doing it just to do it, or if you feel like there's a measurable model that you can evaluate going through the process. So for me, sometimes ad tech, AI, algorithms are great, but they have a purpose, and their purpose isn't always to be the most efficient marketing system for you. Their purpose is to help be efficient for the platform. And so I just think you need to know somebody in the space, whether you buy for them or not, or just have coffee with them or a lunch with them once a month, just to keep your thumb on what's going on in the industry. I just think that's very important, because you need to have ad tech out there, but it's not a one size fits all. You're going to try things that don't work the way you wanted them. And the question, and that we should be really understanding, is a bad result in marketing is great data. I mean, it's great data. Not everything works every time, and people need to understand that, but you need to learn each time. So you've got this historical understanding of what will kind of work in that situation.
It's been interesting to work with my clients because they have different approaches to their content on social, just in social. And we can look at numbers, like one client, for example, a static post to explain something or have a sale works for them. My other clients, their audience doesn't give a flat rat's ass about a sale.
Yeah.
And so there's zero engagement about that. But boy, you put a joke out there in one of these channels, or I had one that was a small business, and it was a charcoal and barbecue retail store. So guys love to see smoking meat.
Yeah. Charcoal smoking meat. Yeah, I know.
All I'd have to do is just put a flaming piece of meat out there on video for 5 seconds.
Yeah,
and
you can
you can just see the tongues drooling over that stuff.
Yeah, it's like chumming for sharks, I guess. Right. They'll come right in.
There's something that work best, but others it doesn't work. So you mentioned having tactics. I would love to get your thoughts. What do you think what is the difference for you between strategy and tactics?
That's a great question. We actually, I've had a conversation with Colin, because the words are used
interchangeably a lot.
Exactly. And so for me, and this is just Eric Reed, okay, this won't fit everybody's definitions. For me, when I'm speaking to clients or to peers, etc., for me, a strategy is what you hope to achieve, what the ultimate outcome is of an effort that you're going to make. You're strategizing to win something. You make a strategy before you enter. I'm going to use a sports analogy. I'm sorry. It's, meat, smoke, guys, sports, right? But you make a plan of how you're going to win or achieve the objective. It could be a military campaign. You're making a strategy on how you're going to achieve that goal. That's a strategy, understanding all the pitfalls, all the highs, the lows, the what ifs, the possibilities. We put a strategy to understand that journey, put it in a box so we understand it, put a boundary around it. That's that we have a strategy to deal with everything that could be in that universe while we're trying to achieve that goal. The tactics are then that we come in and take and put in place along the way. If you go back to the sports analogy and you come up with a strategy and how you're going to, team A is going to beat team B. We'll go with Louisville Cardinals versus UC Bearcats, just to keep it kind of close to you and I. So you'd go in with the strategy of how you're going to do that before the end of the game. The tactics are you're going to run this specific defense, you're going to run this specific offense, you're going to, you've put in specific things that are tangible that you can execute on. That's a tactic for me. A strategy is thought, tactic is action.
I agree completely, and thank you very much for validating that. That's validating me.
For what that's worth, you've got the sign off of Eric Reed, right? But it is an important question because, and it's like if you're talking to somebody for the first time and they start throwing around, well, we're they're using strategy where tactic is, it's not like you shut them down and say, no, you're wrong there, but it gives you some insight to kind of educate and help them to understand. And because at the end of the day, they want results. And so sometimes if we hang everything on a because strategies, I got news for you, they're not going to work even 75% of the time. They're just not going to. A strategy is the best laid out plans and effort to achieve that goal. But we know there's going to be hidden dangers, obstacles, bridges are going to be out, and you've got to take a detour to get around. It doesn't happen where that stuff doesn't happen. And so tactically, you're going to have to pivot. There's not a week that goes by where I'm not, and probably you're the same, and many people listening to this aren't making tactical pivots, recommendation changes based on what we're seeing that still are in line with the strategy, but are going to require a different tactic to move things along in the direction of the ultimate KPI.
I think public relations fights this all the time, especially during election season.
Yeah.
So if a business has something amazing going on, or let's say a school has something amazing going on, they're not going to get the airtime because all the politicians are taking it up.
Yes. Yeah.
So they have to find a different tactic versus trying to get on the news.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we have to do the same thing in our own businesses. So Eric, you've been in the business for a while. What is something you wish you would have known sooner?
So, I think that's a great question. Something that I wish I would have known sooner. I think it's just the reliance on data. And that might sound kind of shocking, right? So, well, data, that's what digital marketing is. It is data. So I think data is important. I think we should review it. I think we should look at it in an abundance. But I think the reliance of data is something that, as I went through my career, I really realized how much weight people put on data. And I want to be careful here because, yeah, I understand data is king, but data is interpreted in 50,000 different ways. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the understanding of like not fighting ahead of time, and maybe fighting is not the word, not laying out ahead of time. There's that old philosophy of, answering the objections before they happen. So what I've learned later in my career, whether it's advising clients or putting programs together for them to achieve their goals, is really talking about what we want to glean from the data. The data's because you could see the data says, we said it earlier, you got a 50,000 visitors to your website in 24 hours. You could run around and tell everybody how great that is. Here's the bad news. You didn't sell a thing and you're about ready to shut your doors. So that data, you didn't really, you didn't weigh it and measure it and put it in the context it needed to be in to understand how to respond to it. So I think for me, a long way to get to it is understanding how important data is, but more importantly, misconstrued. I always knew data was important, but I think not letting people take the data and run and tell five people before I could catch up to them and say, no, you're sharing that data the wrong way. That's not necessarily what that means. We need to step back and think about this a little bit.
So throughout our conversation here, I'm hearing a lot of examples and explanation about what you just said with data. Does it matter?
Either way, I think.
I mean, I have an accent. It's redneck. Yeah. So we'll just go with that. I'm guilty of this myself. I quickly skim it, make a decision, and move on. Mm-hmm. Versus going deeper. So I feel like most of us probably stay in the shallow end of figuring out what's really going on, whether it be quantitative data or qualitative feedback, that we don't sit with it long enough to make a really good strategic move with it.
Yeah, and I think you get in that space and thinking about what it means based on what you've read, what's been shared with you, what you can find by searching online. A perfect example of data. I'll do that too. The perfect example there is bounce rate on your website. If you were to tell somebody that you have a 95% bounce rate on the website, you would be like, oh my gosh, 95 out of 100 people are leaving my site before they're even engaging with it. But if their site was a single page website where there was one action that you wanted to take on that page, then people bouncing that fast is more than enough time. I mean, it doesn't mean anything more than it's just a number. It doesn't mean anything until you put a definition on both sides of it. The theory is 45 to 50% bounce rate is good. Well, who made that up? I mean, it's we call it the math of marketing. Who said that that's the number? There's a variety. You have a content site. If I had a content site that was downloadable documents and legal jargon, and my bounce rate was like 15%, I would be like, well, of course they can't get through all that content that quick, so they're staying on that site forever. If I had a site that was supposed to be fast moving, transactional, and that was they were sitting on site for that long, that's a problem. It's only a problem. A data point only means what you define it to mean. And too many people, in my opinion, respond to a data point from a holistic from a generalization, if you will, of what it means in the industry. And that's where I think most people are looking for help, whether it's consultative, whether it's from an advertising partner, a digital partner, what have you. It's somebody they can trust and know to help them decipher what the data is saying. It's almost like the Indiana Jones, solving the mystery type of thing, right? That's relevance, timely, because the movie's out. It's you can make a bad reaction to data and you're off the path and you're never going to find the treasure. So you really got to slow down, consume it, and understand what does it mean in the world of the definition of what you want that data to do.
So Eric, we've had great conversation, but tell me, what do you have on the horizon and how are you going to accomplish it?
Well, for me, what I have on the horizon is educating, speaking to people from an MNI perspective, representing digital marketing campaigns, etc., while dealing with privacy and third-party data, first-party data. That's a big thing, obviously, coming forward. So most of my time right now is focused on really helping people understand that, because again, you could read a lot, you can make assumptions, some might be right, some might be bad. There's going to be a lot of misinformation going out in the next, year or so. And so, for me, it's really understanding that the value I can provide to anybody who would want to, sit down for coffee, or my friend network, whatever, clients, whatever, the value I can provide is helping them navigate through that and understanding how it could impact their business and the right tactics to place with the right strategy.
Nice. Well, Eric, thank you again so much for your sharing of a lot of great information today, and your time. So appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. The visual background of all your stuff back there is, it's always nice when you talk to somebody who's got a lot going on behind them. It says a lot about their personality and a lot of good things. So
yeah, well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. Take care.
I'll catch you again on the Marketing Podcast Network too.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining us for the Summer of Strategy series on Small Business Success Talk. Remember to share us with your network, leave us a great review, and subscribe for the latest episodes.